All right, so I've spent something close to 20 grand in various forms of online education, and at the minute I run a development agency that I've been running for the past 2.5 years. Got a little team of 5 people, and it's brought me a very, very good quality of life. And having spent about 20K, which is not that much in the grand scheme of things in the coaching space. I know that there's very, very expensive things, but from what I have spent, I have learned a lot of lessons that have informed my decisions that I make today. And I wanted to share some of that because I think that online education space is booming. And first and foremost, one of the things I've learned is that it's pretty hit or miss. Like, the reality is, there's a lot of good marketing of shit products, and there's a lot of bad marketing for amazing products. And so you don't always necessarily see the best thing immediately. But things can be like, there are certain programs which can be absolutely life-changing if you find the right one. And from what I have found, I think the right ones are the ones where you have community, but not just community where you get dumped into some big server with 300 people and you don't know anybody's actual name, but something that's cohort-based and stuff like that, where you meet with the same people consistently. And so you actually create a network where you know people's names, you know their dog's name, you know what they had for breakfast, you know them personally, rather than just a community where you meet a bunch of people and kind of like superficially talk to them on some random server and you never really speak to them. That's one of the first things. Is like, it's not just community, but it's also about how is that organized and how are you encouraged to create relationships within that community? Because that is ultimately, I think, what makes really the best programs. Another thing I would say is, just having spent a lot of money, some of these programs I really threw myself into them, some of them not so much, and that is my own fault. But even then, I would say, like, some of them are really shit. But despite being shit, they can still act as a forcing function. Like, they don't deliver on what they promise. There's a big promise and you buy into it. And honestly, I spent probably one of the highest ticket things I ever bought in one purchase. There's this one particular program which I did for 7.5 grand, and the guy who's selling it was complete smoke and mirrors. Like, it's just, talk big numbers, do the thing, and then like just no follow up. Back end is horrendous. Like, the coaching was really bad. Like, we had some guys and then those guys left and whatever. And that was really shit. But it did actually get me to start thinking about certain things, just because I went through some of the content and it was like, I invested 7.5K into something that was very big for me. And it was very painful to kind of like not make anything of it. I've also spent like 5K on a coaching that was complete shit. And then I really didn't make much of it at all. But it was a forcing function to also light a fire under my ass and I guess like get stuff moving. The reality is, though, it is really hit or miss. And the thing that I have tried to keep in mind is, like, you have to be willing to risk a little bit in order to get to the next step. Because, like, let's say you do something for 2 grand and it's useless. You do for 3 grand and it's useless. You do 5 and it's useless. You're now 10K in the hole. Then you do another program for 3 grand, and that one gets you to, let's say, 10 a month or 20 a month, whatever it is. Like, that, the one time that it works is all that matters. It doesn't matter how much you lost, because like that one time it works, you'll make and you'll learn enough to offset the cost of that. So I will say that about like the different programs that I've done is, like, I don't really regret any of them, because it just takes one to actually work for things to really kind of like start to move and whatever. And you learn, and some of the lessons are expensive. In the worst case scenario, you learn what not to buy. And so you are always learning one way or another. And like, I mean, part of this is just my approach, but I have a very high appetite for risk. My risk tolerance is very high. And so I'm willing to throw myself at these things, because like, I'm just optimized for learning. I don't care about cash in the bank. I care about how much can I learn in the shortest period of time. And that means making more decisions and testing more things. And if that means testing more courses and whatever, then so be it. Yeah, that's a big thing for me. Like, I don't really look at, like, I don't care how much it is if I believe that it can bring me more than the value of that ticket. Now, I will say, I have the tendency to trust too easily, and that is a very costly mistake, and obviously it's cost me a lot of money. Honestly, I would say like more than half of it wasn't really worth it of that like 20 or so grand that I spent. So, like more than half of it just wasn't that great, but the other half like compensated. I think also one of the other things I've learned is a lot of it, you just have to do the obvious stuff. And actually, I found one of the reasons why a program might be good is any method of accountability, because that is one of the parts that a lot of people struggle with. But it's just showing up consistently and saying, hey, look, have you done the thing? Have you done the thing? Have you done the thing? Have you done this? Have you done that? Like checking in constantly, or some kind of cohort-based thing where you have to kind of show your friends that you've done the thing. That is really powerful. And that is a lot more like there's a larger forcing function for you to make more out of that program than one where you just buy, for example, content, right? Because if you do not consume the content, nothing happens. The more forcing functions you have to complete the thing, the better I would consider the program. And I would just take that into account, just as like human nature, we tend to forget about things and be lazy and whatever. And I'm guilty of that. And it's not something I'm proud of, and something like I've like 100% been failing at. And I regret that, but it is what it is. But like a lot of the time I don't push through as much as I could. And that's like, the more forcing functions you have, the easier it will be. And you, as a business owner, you'll have a million things on your mind all the time. And so if you have something that brings that to the forefront of your to-do list consistently, it is much more likely that you will take out more value from that program. That's probably another key thing. And yeah, like I look at that now, and like it's just at the end of the day, it's part of the journey that you have to go through. And so I don't really look at it with like any kind of crazy regret or anything. Like, yeah, sometimes it sucked. And in particular, there was this one guy who I paid $5,000 to him, and I had 6.5, 7 grand at max. I literally, I went down to my last pennies for him. He was a Hail Mary. I just bought into the smoke and mirrors of the guy. It wasn't even like online social media presence. It was a guy I met face to face, and I trusted him, whatever. And then he was like trying to help me sell clients, and he was making stuff up. It was horrible. Like, it was just like, I'm not building my business off the back of this. This is horrendous. And that really sucked. Like, it cost me a lot of money. And at the time it was like 80-90% of what I had. And that really sucked. But at the end of the day, I don't think I massively regret it, because like I figured it out. Like it really just like I'm too stubborn to let this thing fail, and I know that, and so like I'm willing to risk a lot. But I will say, I think like it's worth trying, because whatever tiny lessons you might learn are still worth it. You're optimizing for learning to eventually make things work, because when they click, then they start to move, and you will offset the cost of all those kind of like mistakes and missteps. Like each of those missteps will cost you like generally you cannot pay more than what you have, unless you're like getting yourself really deep into debt. But you can't pay for like a 50K course if you don't have 50K. And so you will pay much smaller ticket things. And even if they cost you a lot of money over time, when things click finally, you'll make that money back very, very fast. At least that has been my experience. Like, even though a lot of the programs, sure, maybe that guy that I paid $5,000 for his coaching, he was pretty shit. But you know what? Like, I make that money back on a consistent basis now. Like, I've made way more. I could afford that program, several times over with the money I've made just this year. So, like, I think ultimately it wasn't like it doesn't. I don't really have a lot of regret over those decisions. I'm not really like afraid of them. I will say at the time it did burn me a little. Like, it kind of made me more reserved about my money, and I think that was a net positive. And I will also say, like, as your business grows, as you bring on team members, your requirement for runway grows. When I'm by myself, I can play hardball because I can take on a very, very high risk tolerance, and I can afford to like like I'm willing to put myself on the line. Whereas the more employees and team members I have, I can't do that as much. I need to create more stability and more guarantee for them, obviously. I think that's like my responsibility as a business owner, to provide for the people that are choosing to give their time to me. And not just provide to them, but like be reliable for them, and be reliable as a person. I think that's what it means to be a good business owner. So yeah. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Haven't spent a lot of money on online stuff, some good, some bad. Um, and yeah, I I think that space is going somewhere, and it's really where like the future of education, a lot of education is, especially business stuff right now. That's where you get most of it. I would say like mentorships and coaching programs are pretty, like, personally, I find those more worthwhile than courses, because I want, like, I think course wise, most like content on the internet is free, and so you can find a lot of the content for free. Now, coaching is interesting just because you have somebody to bounce with, and ask questions and go back to, and that for me I think is interesting, and that's probably what I would invest in right now. Having spent some on coaches, some on courses, I've generally found, I think if you find a good coach, it'll take you a lot further than a good course. But yeah, the courses also oftentimes, like, they're not that groundbreaking. They just tell you the obvious stuff that you need to be doing. But when you spend money on it, you kind of wake up to it a little bit more, and you realize, oh, I paid a lot of money for this, and so I should probably, like, it just reminds you, and it brings you back to it tethers you back to the reality that you need to do the obvious things. And sometimes paying for that is a forcing function, and that's okay. Like, I probably could have learned some of the lessons without paying $7.5K, but I did it, and it probably forced me to snap back into those lessons much faster than I otherwise would have. So yeah. Anyway, I gotta wrap up some work and reviews, and try and see if I can work on some social content for my company, because that's been lacking, and that's my plan. I've been procrastinating that for far too long. So I'm gonna get back to that, and yeah, also want to see if I can come up with some better video ideas. If people have comments, happy to indulge and reply to basically anybody's questions as videos.